the second event that we are jointly holding on the movie City Without Jews as its 100th anniversary. The movie is from 1924. After a screening of the movie and the Hebrew panel that we held last week at the Jerusalem Cinematheque, we would like to open up tonight further aspects on the movie and the historic context from which it stems tonight with our English-speaking audience. And I just would like to mention that the initiative of organizing these two events came from Dr. Sharon Gordon, and I would like to thank her for this. And we organized all this jointly with various partners. I'd like to thank the Center for Austrian Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the Richard Köbner Minerva Center for German History at the Hebrew University, also the Center for Austrian and German Studies at Ben Gurion University in the Negev, the Austrian Cultural Forum, and the Jerusalem Cinematheque for the good cooperation. And obviously, without my dear colleagues at the Institute, the Deputy Director, Sharon Livney, and Adi Astahan, this event would not take place. I'm very glad that we will have three speakers with us tonight, Dr. Nathan Markus, Professor Lisa Silverman, and Professor Tobias Ebrecht Hartmann, who are specialists on various aspects, and I'm much looking forward to the lectures and the conversation afterwards. We said everybody had 15 minutes time. You are all welcome to write your comments or questions into the chat, and we will be able to answer them afterwards. And I would like to start out with Dr. Nathan Markus. He's a senior lecturer of history at Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and with a special interest in the history of economics and finance in the European history of the 20th century, and a special focus, and that's right where we are, on the interwar period in Austrian and German financial history. And I think, Nathan, you will be able to really give us a good historical background in which this movie actually is setting. Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. Hi, everybody. It's a great honor and pleasure to be on this panel. And I've been given the task to provide you with some of the factual background to the fictional movie and book, which I've both read and saw over the last few days. So it's fresh in my memory. What I will do is, in the 50 minutes that I have, first I will give a bit of the economic setting, talk about hyperinflation, which is at the background more of the book than of the movie. In the movie, it comes out much less. In the book, it's much clearer that the backdrop is the constant depreciation of the Austrian crown, the Austrian currency. And then I will show you some historical documents, caricatures, which I find, for those of you who've seen the movie or read the book, are fascinatingly similar to what you see in the newspapers of Vienna during these 2 years of hyperinflation. So before I share my graphs and visuals with you, the setting is quite clear. After World War I, Austria is the big loser. We like to think of Germany. We also all know about the German hyperinflation, but the truth is that Austria suffers of hyperinflation before Germany. Austrian hyperinflation starts in 1921 and ends in 1924, whereas the German one only starts picking up in 1923. Or maybe like late 1922. So Austria is a trendsetter in terms of financial disaster, not only in the 1920s. Also, 1873 is an important date to keep in mind, because this association of Jews and the economy in Vienna starts really before World War I. 1873, the Gründerkrach, which went out from Vienna and caused financial troubles, bankruptcies, not only in Austria, but also in Berlin, also in Germany. So there's an association between financial troubles and Jews in Austria that goes back into the 19th century and comes out again after World War I, when Austria is the first country in Europe, or the first democracy, we must say, maybe, because Bolshevik Russia has an hyperinflation too. But there Keynes thinks that Lenin did that on purpose, so it doesn't really count. So if we take hyperinflation as a non-intentional disaster, Austria is the first country that suffers of it, because it has, as I'd like to phrase it, it faces the problems of an empire. It's an empire that lost the war. it has debts of an empire, it has soldiers coming home from an imperial army, it faces economic problems on an imperial scale, but the means it has to deal with it are that of a republic, of a small republic. Austria loses much, Austro-Hungary, the dual monarchy, loses much of its territory, and what is left is a big city, Vienna, also termed a hydrocephalus, a Wasserkopf, much too big for this, what is now an Alpine republic. And so the government, which can't agree on, for various reasons, on economic policy, resorts to printing money, which creates hyperinflation, which is the backdrop of the book and in some ways also of the movie. And let me see if we can do this. So this is how hyperinflation looks like, right? What it means is, what you see here is that in both Zurich and New York, the Austrian currency is depreciating over time. Beginning basically in 1921, it starts losing value. You need more and more shillings or crowns at the time, still Austrian crowns, to buy either a US dollar or a Swiss franc. And it comes out also very nicely in the movie how, especially also in the book, how Zurich is the quotation. That's what everybody in Vienna talks about. You know, the crown rises in Zurich, the crown falls in Zurich. That's where the news come from. But the money is in New York. The credits, the government, the Bundeskanzler is looking for the anti-Semitic financier of his anti-Jewish policy. He is in New York. The hyperinflation is created by the fact that circulation, the gray line, goes up. The government prints money, circulation rises. There's more and more money in circulation, and as you see, the black line goes down. Even though there's more money in circulation, the actual value, what is called real cash balances, declines. People actually have much less money than they had before, even though there's more money around. It's an impoverishment of the population and of the economy. And if we go to this graph, we can see what the reason is behind it. It's a strong correlation between the increases in circulation, the black line, and the gray line, treasury bills. So what happens is that the government is printing money, the black line, to finance its debt, treasury bills. It's selling treasury bills, debt, to the national bank. And this is what causes the hyperinflation, the big devaluation of money. To sum up the economic background of the story, right? The budget is forced to print money to cover its deficits. In this case, it's largely the import of food. Vienna is a huge city. The agricultural lands lie in Hungary. The industry lies in what is now Czechoslovakia. The people are hungry. The government imports food by paying for it by printing money. Speculators, also whom we see in the book and the movie, are aware of this, and they make everything worse. They run to the bank or they run to the stock exchange, and knowing that the currency is going to fall, they bet on that. They make future contracts, and they make things even worse. And thereby they create a self-fulfilling economy where prices keep rising and the value of money keeps dropping. And what is needed from economic point of view is going to be a regime change, which comes with the League of Nations in 1924. And this intervention of the League of Nations is important because it's very debated by the Viennese. Should we allow these foreigners, this foreign body, this new body, which is basically run by the victors? It's run by the Brits and the French, because the Americans stay out. Should we allow them to come and solve our problems? And I find that in a way, the book and the movie, while it's talking about, kicking out the Jews and letting them back in to solve this economic disaster, can be also read as let in foreigners, let in the international community, let in the League of Nations to solve our economic problems. And I will show you this with the caricatures I want to present to you in the second part of my presentation. So I found it very interesting. Here you have a caricature from 1921. So hyperinflation, as you saw, the first graph lasts from 1921 to 1922. And this is a scene where you see young Viennese ladies who might have lovers discussing what is going to happen now that their lovers, their bankers, their rich sugar daddies lost their fortune. And so one of them says to the other, well, you're gonna see how quickly my love to him is gonna fade away. The woman is shown to be materialistic, but this scene is actually parallels an exact scene in the book. We're at the Gumpendorfer Straße at a club for a gentleman's club. We have exactly the same scene, dialogue between two women. I'm not saying that this was the inspiration for the scene in the book, but it shows that the scenes in the book and parallel or reflect actual discourse or experiences or ways of dealing with this economic crisis in Viennese society. And this is a similar joke, right? Also two young ladies who have elderly lovers who realize that business must be terrible because all their sugar daddies are in love again with their own wives. And you will see that in these caricatures, these women are really depicted as losing their morality, as having being very materialistic and willing to exchange romantic love for currency or foreign currency. And here, this is a woman who is expecting a guest, and her maid tells her there's a certain guest at the door, and she asks him, what's the name of this? What's the name of the sir? And he says, "Ich weiß, uns hat eine ganz neue Valuta." I only know he has a very new foreign currency, which is enough to introduce this gentleman. And here the same theme of foreigners having foreign currency. An elderly man being concerned about a young lady having an American friend and telling him he's fake, everything's fake about him, and she's worried and says, "What? Even his dollar checks might be fake." Again, the materialism of these women. If we jump now to how Jews are depicted, we will see that Jews are depicted the other way around, but they are blamed in these caricatures for the economic problems. So just as in the movies and in the movie and in the book, Jews are being blamed for the absence of Jews is the cause of the economic collapse in Utopia or in Austria in the book. They're also seen as being the cause of hyperinflation or being profiting from hyperinflation. This is a caricature showing two Jewish gentlemen in a hotel during hyperinflation, making fun of the fact that there are so many Austrian unemployed while they are enjoying the good life of a resort. And here a series of cartoons or caricatures printed in the conservative Reichspost, the government publication, showing the connection or perceived connection of Jews with hyperinflation. So in this case, these are speculators who are being punished because the crown is appreciating again. And it's, I believe, quite easy to see how those figures here are meant to represent Jews. The same here. The title of the caricature is "There's a rumor going around the stock exchange," which is hurting the speculators, who here are also depicted clearly as being Jewish.
Markus, sorry, may I interrupt you for a moment? Could you use the full screen version? Then it will be easier for people to see the
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. So, and he also what is meant to be a reassuring caricature of how the currency is going to, stabilize, appreciate, and again, it's hurting the speculators who are depicted as Jews. And this is classic also of Jewish speculators in Zurich, driving or destroying the value of the Austrian currency by dealing or betting against it using dollars. So as you see here, this is the final caricature. This is Austria at its deathbed. And who is coming to save Austria are the foreigners, the French, the Italians, and the English, who are members of the League of Nations, and who in 1922 finally come and develop this rescue package, which is the first kind of international intervention of its kind, and provides foreign loans to stabilize the Austrian economy. So we have hyperinflation, we have blaming the Jews during hyperinflation for these problems, and then we have the League of Nations that arrives and solves this predicament. And so I think there's a parallel between this discourse in Vienna during 1921 and 2022 and 23, which where people are debating, should we let the League of Nations come here? Should we let them help us? And another group is saying, the problem are the Jews. If the Jews are the ones who are destroying our currency, and we see that this is really something people are saying in these caricatures. And I think you could read this novel and you could see the movie also as a way of saying, if we get rid of the Jews, we have an economic problem. If the Jews come back, our economy goes well. This is seeing the Jews as foreigners and inviting them back in, which in reality you can translate into, we need the League of Nations to come in and stabilize our economy, which is actually also what happens. And we also see then this association of Jews and hyperinflation somewhat disappear, not completely, but the currency actually stabilizes. Austria becomes a healthy economy, at least for a few years, until then the Great Depression changes everything again after 1929. So that was my contribution. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks a lot. Do you know, or did you have the chance to see like reviews, how people reacted both to the book and to the movie, in these years? I mean,
the movie comes out after all of this has
yes.
happened. It only comes out in 1954. I didn't. So the short answer is no. The Reigen was much more of an issue. Schnitzer's The Reigen was a huge movie and problem of theater play and problem during hyperinflation.
Okay, I'm curious. Maybe Lisa or Tobias could help us with this. Thank you very much. And then I would like to present our second speaker, Professor Lisa Silverman. Thanks for joining in. Lisa Silverman is professor of history and Jewish studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and she specializes in modern German and Austrian Jewish cultural history with a focus on gender, visual cultures, and anti-Semitism. She currently serves as a contributing editor of the Leo Baeck Institute yearbook, and she's author of the book Becoming Austrians, Jews and Culture Between the World Wars, came out in Oxford in 2012. And she's co-authoring with Daniel Magilov, Holocaust Representations and History, an introduction that came out in 2015 and the edited version, second version in 2019. She's currently working on a new publication on the post-war anti-Semite culture and complicity after the Holocaust, which also will come out at Oxford University Press. And Lisa, I'm very curious for your contribution tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Let me just make sure here. Does that work? Can you see Can you see?
Yeah, we can see that. Just please use the full screen option and then.
I'm sorry, Georg. My tech support here, it didn't work this time. Let me try again. Okay. Over here. It's not. Maybe because this is. Oh, because it's here. I moved it. Oh no. It did work before. Try. I tried again over here. Do you see anything?
Yeah, we see it.
But small, right? Not big.
Yeah, but I think it's doable. So just it's fine.
Oh, you know what? Let me try. What about now?
Perfect.
Now? Is that
Yes,
better?
perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm so
No,
sorry.
everything's okay.
Okay. Okay, so the film is, as has been mentioned, is based on author Hugo Bettauer's 1922 novel, Die Stadt ohne Juden. But what a lot of people don't know is that this book satirizes a very anti-Semitic book that appeared in 1900 by Josef Scheicher, who is an anti-Semitic priest and parliamentarian. And that book is actually a very straightforward imagination of Vienna's expulsion of the Jews and the utopia, the very positive utopia that results when that happens, economically, but also culturally, peacefully. And so Bettauer takes what Scheicher had posited as a utopian Vienna without Jews, and what in the book is a really effective and cutting critique, I think, turns Vienna into this dystopian city that collapses after the Jews are expelled. So, by exaggerating and satirizing almost every imaginable stereotype about both Jews and non Jews in Austria, Bettauer's novel ridicules not only Christians who put anti Semitic acts into practice, but also Jews who, in their attempts to escape their Jewishness, buy into those ideals and perpetuate those very same stereotypes that they often claim to lament as they try to shed their Jewishness in the hopes of becoming Austrians. And so here I see the power of the novel as critiquing the absurdity of this system that creates these categories. And the novel is not really meant to be a serious and sober plea for tolerance, as it is sometimes portrayed. And how do we know for sure? I think because at the end of the book, the anti-Semitic mayor who had expelled the Jews in the first place ends up welcoming them back as if nothing has happened. And so what people tend to see as the, looking forward prediction for the future is also really a commentary on Vienna's past expulsions in 1420 and 1670, and sort of a critique of the repeat of that cycle. The Jews just keep coming back and the whole thing starts again as if nothing's happened. But the story loses some of this power on screen. It keeps that intent of critiquing anti-Semitism, but those exaggerations are meant to be funny don't end up breaking up the stereotypes. They really just hold them intact. And in trying to reach a broad international audience with a serious story, the film includes images of pitiful Jews with whom we are intended to sympathize, as it upholds stereotypical depictions of bearded, impoverished Jewish men from the East, or with curly hair and thick lips, while Jewish women appear as greedy and superficial consumers of luxury items. These visualized depictions muddy an already weak critique. So in what follows, I'm going to detail how the representation of some Jewish men and women in the film, as well as some of the actors chosen to portray them, engaged contemporary anxieties about Jews' appearance, behavior, and ability to pass as non-Jews. And I'm also going to point out some of the differences between the two versions of the film we currently have, as well as how they differed from the novel on which they were based. And I think that doing this can help us understand some of the limits of the film as a critique of anti-Semitism. So the newest version of the film was restored from reels discovered in Paris in 2015. And something interesting about if you compare the version with that which we had before is that there are many more scenes depicting Jews that were either shortened or cut out completely from that earlier version. Some of these extend or intensify the earlier version's already exaggerated stereotypical depictions. And something you might not know is that these stereotypical depictions of Jews were a staple of Jewish theater, of cabaret in that interwar period. But the novel tried to sort of challenge some of those assumptions that were portrayed on the stage. And I think that those satires reveal Jewish difference as part of an ephemeral and ultimately absurd ordering system. But the film doesn't really work as a satire. It has some humorous elements, but it intends a serious and perhaps more comforting message to a broader international audience. So the film has some of the things, and especially the restored film has things the novel doesn't have, which includes celebratory portrayals of Jews participating in religious rituals in the synagogue and at home. It has groups of Jews facing violent and humiliating acts of anti-Semitism, and Jews expelled from the city with meager belongings on their back in the dark, cold winter. Very philo-Semitic scenes, one could say, that audiences can sympathize with. Okay. So in the film, most of the Jewish men are depicted stereotypically. They're unmistakably Jewish with dark hair or typically gray beard, large nose, large lips, but they all speak and they are given dialogue. Jewish women characters, on the other hand, if they appear at all, appear for only a few seconds and they don't speak. They're mothers, wives, girlfriends, synagogue congregants, and most crucially, consumers of luxury department store clothing. These women never engage in dialogue, and with the exception of one brief scene, they're always depicted together with Jewish men. Their presence is always contingent upon their male counterparts. So the longest extended scene in the new version depicts Jewish women flocking to the department store to buy up the fancy clothes they need before being expelled, which they're not too upset about. It's more like a leisure trip for them. So Jewish women, however, are not just linked with superficiality and materialism. They're also shown to be inferior to Christian women as partners. The plot of both film and novel hinge on an interfaith couple, the Jewish Leo and his fiancée, the sweet and innocent Christian Lotte, you see depicted here on the top. As dissatisfaction and unrest arise among the population, Leo emerges as the hero of the story. After the Jews' expulsion, he becomes a successful artist in Paris and secretly returns to the city by cleverly distinguishing himself as a Frenchman. Through his own self-professed Jewish impudence and at the expense of the Aryan-Austrians' trusting nature, Leo gets the law repealed and the Jews are welcomed back into the country, led by Leo's triumphant return. True to Bettauer's depiction of him in the book, Leo appears in the film as a dark-haired, handsome bourgeois gentleman. But the fact that he's played by the well-known non-Jewish actor Johannes Riemann and his fiancée Lotte is played by Annie Milani, a popular non-Jewish actress, substantially diffuses this role that the couple played in advancing the novel's satirical critique. In the novel, Lotte and Leo were the ideal interfaith couple, unaware of their own flawed pattern that fits anti-Semitic stereotypes. Lotte's willingness to wed a Jewish man doesn't erase what in the novel are her own anti-Semitic prejudices, while Leo happily plays this stereotypical role of this cunning Jew who masquerades as a non-Jew in order to disturb the social and political order. So like the joke is on them. But because they are both portrayed in the film via known Christian actors, they sort of become a non-Jewish coded ideal couple on the basis of those very real Christian actors who play the parts. So they remain at the center of the film's narrative, but the film adds an interfaith couple, another one that doesn't appear in the novel, and that's the one you see portrayed here below. This Kati, the corpulent Christian cook of the anti-Semitic parliamentarian Fulbert, and her equally fat Jewish lover, Isidor, played by Jewish actors, Gisela Verbezerk and Armin Berg, both well known for their comedic stage appearances in Jewish theater. So Kathy and Isidore are portrayed as working class, simple-minded, comical, and though they also play an interfaith couple, they're nevertheless both thoroughly coded as Jewish in both appearance and affect. When Isidore must leave, Kati's exaggerated sobs, in contrast to Lotte's serious weeping, accompany her announcement of her intention to follow Isidore to the promised land as she pretends to stab herself with a large kitchen knife. Isidore takes the knife away and uses it to carve chicken, gesticulates and tries to calm her down, and finally gives her a kiss. So she then goes to the next room to lay another Jewish guilt trip on her boss, Fulbert, who had eagerly supported the expulsion. If I commit suicide, it's your fault. So the humor, of course, is that Isidore can't wait to be freed from her shrewish clutches, and simple Kati is easily dissuaded. And if you've seen the film, you might remember there's this comical film where she sees him off, for Zion with a basket of sausages saying, please send me a postcard from there. And then we see him depicted in Zion brokering a deal, eating a big matzah. It's all very funny. But by casting Christians in the roles of these ideal mixed couple and Jews as their parodic counterpart, the film has this humorous effect, but it doesn't destabilize any of these categories of Jewish difference that it's claiming to counter as an anti-Semitic film. So the Jewish looks at these actors evince the trope of passing that runs through the entire film. The desire of many Jews to pass as non-Jewish, along with the recognition that doing so played into anti-Semitic accusations that Jews were inauthentic poseurs, only capable of mimicry, was a vexing problem that had long been represented in Central European stage and screen. By 1924, Gisela Verbitzer, originally from Bratislava, was already an established actress in Vienna's Jewish theaters, playing in comedies that typically featured her as a strong widow from a petty bourgeois Jewish milieu. So she often played roles that were similar to what has been characterized as the American Yiddish mama, the stereotypical corpulent, attention-demanding yet big-hearted mother who plied her sons with food and tries to control them. People might have recognized this when they saw the film. And in these roles, Verbitzer plays women who control their men and hold them back from assimilating and independence, the flip side of the demanding and seductive Jewish female consumer that's also portrayed in the film. Okay. So her inclusion in the film as Kati, the cook, is not a covert attempt to reincorporate Jewish women into the story, but I think it's really an effort to reassure audiences that Jewish women like her can't really pass as non-Jews. So to be sure, there is one Jewish actor, Siggy Hofer, who plays a bit part as a burly Christian tavern keeper. But there are two other known Jewish male actors in the film, Armin Berg and Abish Meisels. Both of them play Jews and both look stereotypically Jewish to some degree. Berg's Isidore is corpulent and has a big nose and bushy eyebrows. Abish Meisels appears as part of a group of men whose Jewishness is marked not only by exaggerated physical features, but by signature markers of Orthodox Judaism, such as beard or payot, or religious garb, such as talit and kippot, that are in other scenes. But something that's interesting is that at times these Jewish male characters speak while using exaggerated hand gestures in a typically Jewish way, or they sway back and forth while praying. So the film also relies upon many more negative stereotypical markers of Jewishness for its depiction of other Jewish men, such as this one. First, there's another scene in which a journalist with extremely thick lips and a bulbous nose calls himself a vash esht goy, a dyed-in-the-wool Gentile, because his parents converted. And he expresses relief that nobody will recognize him as a Jew based on his appearance. He even says, oh, Gott sei Dank, der Schein trügt, thank God, my appearance fools everybody. And the audience is in on the joke at his expense, of course, because he can't pass. And then there's a second journalist who appears in an outdoor market, marked as a Jew, not only by virtue of his profession, but also by his wavy black hair and large ears and lips here. And something that I'll just mention quickly that is very interesting is that in this newer version of the film, this scene at the market where he appears and is pelted with eggs by some women who are upset at the price of eggs, they recognize him as a Jew ostensibly and pelt him with eggs. There are many more extended scenes of that in the new film, and it comes across as an even more humiliating scene. So these characters' stereotypical Jewish looks belie the film's deeper subtext, was that the audience shouldn't worry about Jews being able to pass as non-Jews. So while Bettauer's novel destabilizes the categories of Jewish difference by emphasizing the equal ridiculousness of the Jews and the non-Jews who uphold it, the film replicates the very foibles of the people that the novel aims to critique. It laments anti-Semitic prejudice, but upholds the constructed ideals from which those are generated, often relying on exaggerated depictions of Jewish women and men that maintain their status as other, a subtext that directly contradicts the film's final message of tolerance. So as intended as a critique of anti-Semitism, it falls short of confronting audiences with the absurdity of the system that creates it. And that sort of helps us understand, I think, the limitations that it has as a film. And I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that would also be really interesting to have a closer look at these two film versions as you did already here. And I'm not enough aware of why things were cut out. So what's the story of the two versions?
I'll address that briefly right now. So we don't really know. Well, one of the versions was found in Amsterdam and the other was found in Paris. And these films were sort of cut by those film theaters for their national audiences, for example. What I think is really interesting is that in the newer version, there are many more scenes that are both sympathetic of Jews, like philo-Semitic scenes where we should sympathize with the poor Jews being expelled. And there are also many more scenes where Jews are humiliated, like that one where they're pelted with eggs. Like in the other version, it's just kind of, oh, it's funny, he's hit with eggs. In this one, you just see him getting pelted, and then his like lips come out, and the egg runs down his face. It's a really humiliating scene, and I think that those scenes are cut out to sort of play down the anti-Semitism of the film, to play down the philo-Semitism of the film, and play up some of those economic reasons that Nathan was talking about. You know, sort of show this film as really sort of a sympathetic portrayal of the trials of the economics of the time, and sort of downplay that anti-Semitism. That's my guess.
Interesting. Thanks a lot. Oh, then I would like to go on and invite our third speaker to the conversation, Professor Tobias Ebrecht-Hartmann. Just want to know, Tobias, everything works with the internet now? You had a problem earlier? You're with us, great. So Tobias is a senior lecturer for film and German studies at the Department of Communication and Journalism and the DAAD Center for German Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He also serves as the Cardinal Franz König Chair in Austrian Studies at the Hebrew University. And Tobias is researching and publishing on visual remembrance of the Shoah, German Jewish and German Israeli cultural history, and digital cultures of remembrance. He especially also in social media, and more especially on TikTok, which is a recent special interest of him. Please, Tobias, go ahead. We cannot hear you yet.
Good. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to both my colleagues who gave fantastic lectures that created the floor for my following remarks, particularly referring to the film versions and actually to one scene which caused a lot of interest after the full version was discovered, as Lisa Silverman already said, in Paris in 2014. And I would like to just show you this scene and then start my presentation. So this sequence is from the part of the film where the Jews are, so to say, expelled from Utopia, from the city that was originally Vienna and was kind of reframed as a kind of a more universal place, although everybody understood in which historical context the film was set, also because of the popularity of the book. And we see here some elements which Lisa already described, the appearance of Jewish characters that kind of more or less look typically Jewish, but this particular sequence also created a lot of resonance among journalists when the restored version, the restored full version was presented to the public. Here in a BBC report, this and similar scenes were framed as desperate goodbyes. And here the critic writes, "Watching it now, the film scenes of the expulsion are some of the most haunting and prescient. The city's Jews are told to leave by Christmas Day. Some of the poorer people leave on foot, accompanied by soldiers with bayonets. Whole communities walk slowly through the snow, some on crutches, some carrying Torah scrolls from the synagogues. Others leave by train. Desperate goodbyes take place on the platforms. A Jewish father embraces his little daughter who is staying behind with her Christian mother." And of course, the fact that these particular scenes resonated so strongly is that they can be conceptualized as a kind of missing link, kind of foreseeing what might happen, what is happening 10, 20 years later with the beginning of anti-Jewish measures, and then specifically with the deportations in Nazi Germany. And that's why I would like to kind of reflect a little bit about this scene as a premediation of certain visual memories that kind of were that can be seen as canonic and founding for the cultural memory of the Shoah, the Holocaust, but of course also to look a little bit into how these scenes themselves have predecessors. But before getting to that, we should briefly look at the film's history. It was said already a lot by Lisa and Nathan. The book, which is the basic of the film, was published in 1922, and only 2 years later, the film version of Stadt ohne Juden premiered in Vienna. The idea was that the film could, so to say, benefit from the popularity and the interest in the book, but the attempt was also to create a film version that, as I said, would kind of universalize some elements of the book and make it more accessible, and to also add some elements. For example, a lot of these kind of scenes that show the expulsion, and also some of these violent scenes, which Lisa mentioned, were also added for the film. As I said, the film version, the film Stadt ohne Juden premiered in Vienna in 1924, and several copies of the film were created because the distributors were expecting a lot of interest. But many of these copies were in relatively poor quality. Irene has already asked about the reactions during the time. So it seems that that the audience was a bit disappointed, specifically from the poor quality of many of these film copies, which created some criticism regarding the viewing experience. Within among film critics, there was criticism that the film softened the tone of the book and made it kind of more accessible. So exactly what the film team had strived for. And there was also criticism regarding the stereotypical portrayal of Jews, which Lisa just described, which was also the main reason why the novel's author Bethauer distanced himself from the film. What is maybe most interesting is that the film still caused a lot of controversy. And I put here a quote by Nikolaus Vostri, the director of the Austrian Film Archive, who was also responsible for the restoration of the film. And he describes, "Today we know that the movie was simply disrupted. The right-wing spectrum felt provoked. Screenings were disrupted. The history of the film's transmission shows us that edits were made after the premiere directly in the screening copies. Scenes were cut out, scenes were rearranged, and presumably the drastic nature of the intertitles was reduced." So this is something which also answers the question and follows what Lisa already said regarding the different versions of the film. So obviously there were a lot of actions by right-wing activists and Nazis organized against the film and film screenings. So already shortly after the premiere, there was a huge incident in a cinema in Wiener Neustadt, where Nazis tried to disrupt the screening in Linz. A screening was cancelled because of threats. And we also know that in several German cities, these things happened. So obviously the film kind of provoked specifically the right-wing anti-Semitic Nazi followers, and thereby had an effect on them. And what is most interesting, of course, is that obviously cinemas themselves edited their versions. They tried again to kind of to soften it, to make it more accessible, to even kind of play down a little bit the tone. In the 1930s, although the film was shown quite frequently in the 1930s, seemingly all copies of Stadt ohne Juden were lost. And this is a fate which is very typical for silent cinema. So we assume that approximately 90% of the silent film heritage is lost forever. Here a quote from the Filmdienst. The film Die Stadt ohne Juden is a prime example of the fragmentary preservation and screening practices, as well as the reception situation in the silent film era. However, in 1991, a copy of Stadt ohne Juden appeared in the National Film Archive of the Netherlands, but this was an incomplete and damaged version. So it can be that it was a version that was shown where where just scenes were cut out, rearranged, whatever. So this was the film as we thought it is, or as we knew it, as it was preserved. And after this version was restored with the help of the Bundesarchiv in the Federal Archives in Germany, a complete copy of the film was discovered on a flea market in Paris in 2015, which brought the film archive in Austria to launch a crowdfunding campaign in order to get the money to create a full version of the film based on this copy. So getting now to back to the sequence which I showed you before, also Nikolaus Vostri from the Film Archive Austria emphasized that the strange effect that specifically these scenes evoke a lot of associations and references to other images, and most kind of disturbingly to scenes in the scenery that is actually kind of in the future from the perspective of Stadt ohne Juden, which created this effect that it seems like a kind of forecast of what will happen. In my research, I'm quite interested in how images and specifically kind of these kind of iconic or very symbolic images are traveling through different films and can also be related to a form of kind of migrating or image migration that is instrumental for, on the one hand, for shaping a certain visual memory of historical events, but interesting also has the capacity to interconnect different kinds of events. So these are images or film scenes that create a certain resonance among the viewers, but they also kind of create intertextual references between depictions of different eras and of different historical events. So Vostri clearly kind of references in what images came to his mind when he saw these scenes. He said, Stadt ohne Juden did not, of course, anticipate the Holocaust, but it shows us images that in their urgency almost cut the air out of you with the knowledge of the Holocaust. So you see the images of the displaced person as they set off in endless trains in winter, and of course there are immediate associations with the death marches, which then set off towards the West in 1945 after the concentration camps were dissolved. And here you see, so to say, indeed certain kind of analogies or references, specifically through the composition and just through this kind of framing of people who are kind of walking on streets in the public in rows, which became a kind of a very canonic resonating image. So when sending this sequence from the film to Google image search, you see that there are a lot of references that pop out. So when kind of artificial intelligence, automated image recognition kind of is asked what is similar to this film scene, we see some references to the film itself, but we also see many references to the deportation of Jews, to liberated Soviet prisoners, to the expulsion of Germans from the Eastern territories. So a lot of kind of references to different events. Seeing Stadt ohne Juden, and this particular scene from Stadt ohne Juden as a kind of pre-mediation, as something that kind of precedes what is coming later, which is a terminology introduced by memory scholar Astrid Erl. We also have to keep in mind that this depiction is not kind of something without predecessors. So there is a pre-mediation of this pre-mediation as well. And this is specific artistic depictions of the experiences of Jews, specifically at the beginning of the 20th century, within the context of the pogroms in the beginning of the sorry, I have some visitors here. Okay. And like here in this painting of Samuel Hirzenberg, which itself is also lost, which is also kind of we have the copies, but the painting itself is lost. Looking at the remediations of the motives that appear in Stadt ohne Juden, of course, we have the references to the way how the Nazis depicted the expulsion of Jews and the deportations. And we see that in a certain way, there are even direct references, for example, in a short film, a film from Bruchsal from October 1940, which is kind of even said, so Bruchsal judenfrei, so like city without Jews, Bruchsal without Jews. And with this title, The Last Jews Leave Bruchsal, it is evoking also this kind of idea of the expulsion, of the exodus in a certain way, of the Jewish population. And you see also that photographers, and this is really kind of this is very different sources here. So the deportation of Jews from Balti is it's kind of newsreel photographers, so really professionals, while the Bruchsal film most likely was made by a film amateur, and also the photos which were taken in Laupheim here. And we see nevertheless that kind of certain elements are kind of repeated here that create this intertextual structure. Those depictions, of course, became themselves pre-mediations for later commemorations and for later visualizations of and the imagination of the Holocaust, with kind of turning the walking and expelled Jews into a trope, which, for example, we can find in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising memorial, as reproduced in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, or really as a kind of repeating intratextual element in Marvin Chomsky's film Holocaust. And we can also go even further and ask how far this became really a trope that creates resonance even beyond, so to say, the specific context of the Holocaust. This is a memorial for Jews expelled from Arab countries and Iran, which was just inaugurated some years ago in Jerusalem. It's based on an iconic photograph of a Yemenite family from 1949. Also here we have kind of certain resonances, although we should also keep in mind, of course, differences. And while here the photograph emphasizes through the frontal perspective that there is definitely something, they are kind of a future they can walk towards. The depiction in Stadt ohne Juden is in a certain way by kind of filming those people from the back from the backside, yeah, more skeptical about this future. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tobias, it was a great overview of bringing things together. And I was quite interested because there's obviously not only the story of the images, but what Lisa mentioned, what was quite striking, because there is this circle, the expulsion of Jews has also a very long history, and then coming back. So it's just really, I think we look at it through a Holocaust prisma, and would actually be interesting to have another look also of the descriptions, not only on the visuals of these scenes. We have
that's particularly interesting because I think this surprise that these scenes are part of a film that precedes the Holocaust brought back this question: where do these images originate for? And this is this kind of multi-directional way that these references can work in the past, but also in different kind of futures or different aftermath of the Holocaust.
And Vienna had an expulsion, right? I mean, in the Middle Ages, in the 14th century, there was living memory of Viennese Jews actually being expelled.
Twice,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. We have one question from the audience so far, from Shoshana Bari. She's asking, what's the role of the huge immigration from the East in creating the image of the Jews in the book and the films? Does anybody feel that he or she can answer that?
I can address. Oh, sorry. I'll start with just in the book. Eastern Europe. There are references made to the incoming Eastern European Jews who appeared after from pogroms in World War I, and caused a lot of anxiety among Viennese Jews who were already in Vienna. So that was sort of a something that the book sort of played upon, sort of with sympathy for those refugees who impoverished, who came, often centered in the Leopoldstadt of Vienna, and then the anxieties of the Jews who were already in Vienna, who were worried that they would foster anti-Semitism. And so the book, at least, was satirizing that response.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I read it as a satire. When I read the book and Leo Strakosch says, it's fine, we'll find a solution. You just let in the Jews that actually want to work and who want to be members of society, and all those Galician speculators, we won't let them return. I don't. You think I'm not sure it's actually satire, Lisa. I actually think that how many people felt.
But I think so. I guess I'm not being clear what I mean. I think Bettauer is making fun of Jews who feel that way. There's non-Jews who feel that way, and there are some Jews who Bettauer thinks feel that way, and that's why he has Leo in the book saying that. So Leo himself has anti-Semitic prejudices. Yeah. But you don't really see in the film, Jewish characters aren't the ones with the anti-Semitic prejudices.
Yeah.
No, but they live up to them, right? I mean, in the film you have Rothschild in London, smoking his fat cigar and destroying the Austrian currency. I hope you're right, and that this is meant to be satirical and not meant to actually.
Well, I think in the book it's meant to be satirical, but in the film, what I think both of you have said, like the film has different goals and is trying to reach a broader audience, and it can't be as satirical. It has to deal with actually, no matter what it did, Nazis were going to come and set off bombs and protest it, and other people, Jews, were going to be offended. And so I think the film, as a form of culture, tried to really walk the line. And as a result, I think ends up reinforcing a lot of anti-Semitic stereotypes, a lot more. You can always argue, how can you critique anti-Semitism without actually showing it? It's a really difficult thing to do. But I think Bettauer was sort of a master at it. It's probably why he hated the film so much too.
Maybe this also kind of is as a result from the difference, as you just suggested, of the medium of the book and the medium of the film, and specifically this kind of ambivalent relationship of anti-Semitism with images, and that the film, of course, makes things more concrete, so to say. It has to make it more concrete than the book. So while the book is really kind of satirically, critically engaging with a present everybody anyways has on mind, so can understand and can relate to real social conflicts, the films kind of in a certain way are kind of reducing these things and are is in danger to even be more stereotypical, so to say. So Nathan, you showed some of the caricatures, and this is of course also in a similar way, this ambiguity, so to say, where you have sometimes really shifting between critical towards anti-Semitism and becoming anti-Semitic itself. Just to mention that some of the critics of the film said it was antisemitelnd. So this is, I think, a typical Viennese thing. So it says they didn't say that it's anti-Semitic, but it said it's somehow kind of there's a kind of anti-Semitic sub-level, and which is kind of played with.
So
what was that term? Anti-Semitic.
Antisemitelnd.
Okay.
We are having some questions here, actually, also the wider sense on this topic. One is, how much can we say that Hitler's book Mein Kampf was based on the original Austrian book? Is there any connection that is known to you?
This is a good question. I don't know if my colleagues have any knowledge about it. I found it really interesting to learn that obviously the film nevertheless created a lot of criticism and defense among Nazi followers, and which I think could definitely mean that that book and also the film had an effect on certain imaginations that came later. So that's why I said the film was relatively popular, and it created this kind of controversies, and obviously there were reactions to it from this scene, and that's why I think it might really have had an impact. You never know which images, which depictions have an impact, but it could definitely be. With Hitler and Mein Kampf, I don't know.
Scholars who work on Mein Kampf, it's pretty common for them to say, I know that Hitler, there's nothing new in Mein Kampf. Hitler picked up on a lot of stereotypes when he was living in Vienna, and you see a lot of that reflected. So it very well could, although it's an interesting question.
Okay, so we have two more questions. I just tried to bring them together about if we know if Nazis used the movie, or if not, why later on in the 30s, and also if they watched the film and made remarks to it in the 30s and 40s.
I have no information about this, but taking into consideration that no copy of the film was available up until the beginning of the 1990s, I think it's more realistic that the film kind of already vanished in the early 1930s, or that even some copies were purposely destroyed because the film was not seen as useful and suitable. I don't know of any kind of projections later on or any use of the film. Unfortunately, in our project about kind of the use of Nazi film material, I have a colleague who's working on Der ewige Jude, on the Eternal Jew, which is a compilation film. So they really used material from everywhere, including Zionist films from the 20s. Would be interesting to check if there's any kind of footage of Stadt und Juden in this film. But I think if, then somebody would have already had mentioned it. But yeah, maybe this is worthwhile to look. But I don't know of any cases that the Nazis used it for any propaganda purpose.
Okay, I think we can come to an end. I very much thank you for joining in today. Someone else, yeah. Now my colleagues just mentioning, for those that haven't actually seen the movie yet, it is accessible on YouTube. One of the versions, you can watch it over there. And also those of you who speak Hebrew, we recorded the panel last week at the Jerusalem Cinematheque. That is also on the YouTube of the Leo Baeck Institute in Jerusalem, accessible for all those that are interested. And yeah, thank you very much for joining in, and wish you all a nice evening, a quiet evening, and already Chag Sameach, approaching Passover. Take care.